Number 1.
Chait was a student at Columbia University in the New York City borough of Manhattan in 1972. He was employed at Mama Joy's Delicatessen on Broadway and 113th Street in Manhattan. Chait resided in Fernald Hall on the Columbia University campus. He was last seen on March 13, 1972, as he departed his dormitory room. Chait had spent the day there lying in bed and listening to music. He gave no indication to his roommate that he planned to be out for an extended period of time. He left all of his personal belongings behind, including his books, passport, and uncashed paychecks. He has never been heard from again. Chait is described as a serious, complex, studious youth who may have been depressed at the time of his disappearance. His mother stated her son was moody prior to his disappearance and believed he was letting everyone down. She believes he may have taken his own life, but hopes he is still alive. She stated he was a good student and very proud of getting accepted into Columbia, but became depressed and changed his major after he got a poor grade in an engineering course. Chait's hobbies in 1972 included listening to classical music, relay running for the Columbia track team, and studying architecture and paintings. Chait was a member of the NY Metropolitan Museum of Art and the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. He regularly donated blood to the Red Cross and was also a member of the Sierra Club, an organization dedicated to protecting the environment. For 25 years following his disappearance, Chait's mother received several phone calls which she believes were from him. She would answer the phone, and the caller would refuse to speak. She assumed the caller was Chait and spoke into the phone, telling him she loved him and asking him to come home. After several seconds, the caller would hang up. The calls stopped coming in 1997, and the caller has never been identified. Chait left behind his parents and a younger brother and sister. His father died in 2002, but the rest of his family is alive and they still hope he will be found. His sister established a track scholarship at Columbia in his name.
Number 2.
Refley was last seen leaving Tony G's, a bar on Marcellus Street in Syracuse, New York, at approximately midnight on August 15, 1992. She was accompanied by Philip S. Wally Sr. At the time, they had been drinking at the bar together. She and Wally knew each other socially, but had never dated. He later said they went in separate directions after leaving the bar, and Refley rode away on her bicycle. Refley has never been heard from again. Her live-in boyfriend reported her as a missing person on August 18. She had not told him or her teenage daughter of any plans to leave, and she left her clothing and identification behind at her apartment in the 400 block of Chouinard Street. She had dropped out of sight before, but had never been gone for longer than a day. Refley's blue 10-speed bicycle was located 6 weeks later in a storage shed at Wally's mother's home in Pulaski, New York, 40 miles from Syracuse. After the bicycle was found, Wally changed his story and said he had put Refley's bicycle in his mother's motorhome after they left Tony G's and had started to drive Refley to her apartment, but she saw a cocaine dealer named Angel and asked to be let out so she could buy drugs. Wally said he let her out of the motorhome a few doors down from her home and kept her bicycle, and he last saw her talking to Angel and another man on the street. Authorities doubted Wally's account, however, and Refley's loved ones stated she did not use cocaine. A drop of Refley's blood was found on a pillow inside Wally's trailer. A photo of Wally is posted with this case summary. He was eventually charged with Refley's murder and with the murder of another woman, his girlfriend Josephine Chatraw, who disappeared in 1984. He went to trial in 1996. A witness testified that Wally told him he had shot Refley twice after she tried to steal his cocaine. He then wrapped her body in blankets and plastic, bound it with duct tape, and dumped the bundle into the Salmon River. Authorities searched the river but did not uncover any evidence. Wally maintained his innocence but was convicted of both homicides and sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. He was the first person in Onondaga County history to be convicted of murder without the victim's body, and his trial was also the first where DNA evidence was presented. Wally, who is still in prison and now in poor health, admitted responsibility for Refley and Chatraw's deaths in 2011. He said they were not intentional homicides, however. He offered to lead authorities to the bodies, and a search was launched in November. Authorities looked for Chatraw in a wooded area off Cusson Drive in Amboy, New York, but found nothing and gave up after 2 days. Wally said he'd put Refley's body in a garage next to his mother's home in Pulaski, New York, but the building has since been demolished, and investigators believe her remains wound up in a landfill. Foul play is suspected in Chatraw's and Refley's disappearances due to the circumstances involved. Their remains may not be recoverable.
Number 3.
Cobo was last seen in the New York City borough of Brooklyn on May 6, 2016. She has never been heard from again. She had been raised by her aunt, who legally adopted her. Her biological mother died in March 2016 and afterwards, Cobo became depressed and checked herself into the psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. She became friendly with her hospital roommate, who had a regular male visitor named Justice. After her release from the hospital, Cobo began socializing with her former roommate and Justice. After one outing, on April 26, Cobo came home in the early morning hours disoriented and bruised. Her aunt took her to the hospital, who performed a rape kit and had her tested for drugs. They determined Cobo had been drugged, robbed and sexually assaulted that night, but she couldn't remember where she'd been or who she had been with. On May 6, Cobo told her aunt she wanted to check herself into a drug rehabilitation program. Her aunt dropped her off at the hospital, and a van was supposed to take her to a rehab program in Yonkers, New York. It took hours to get there, and during that time, Cobo was texting her friends and asking them to pick her up in Yonkers so she could get drugs. Justice stated he picked Cobo up in Yonkers on May 6 and brought her back to Brooklyn, dropping her off on 68th Street in Sunset Park. She may have been seen leaving the La Florida Club and Restaurant on 5th Avenue in Sunset Park at 1:45 a.m. May 7, she was reportedly accompanied by a friend of Justice, a man named Antonio, at the time. Cobo's aunt fears she was a victim of human trafficking and may be being held against her will and forced to work as a prostitute somewhere in New York City. Due to her history of drug use and mental illness, she's considered to be in danger. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 4.
Consentino was last seen on Yates Avenue in the New York City borough of the Bronx on July 17, 1994. He had 2 jobs, one as a firefighter and one distributing Snapple juice. On the day of his disappearance, he and his wife went on a picnic in upstate New York. At 11 p.m., when they were on their way home, Consentino's beeper went off. When he and his wife arrived home, he made a call, then told his wife he had to see someone about a Snapple delivery. It wasn't unusual for him to get work-related calls at that time of night. Consentino and his wife walked the dog together, then he left. On July 27, Consentino's car was found abandoned on Mosholu Parkway in the Bronx. There was no indication of his whereabouts at the scene and no indication that a crime had taken place. He has never been heard from again. All his personal belongings and money were left behind. Consentino left behind 3 children, and his wife was pregnant with a 4th at the time of his disappearance. He did not drink alcohol, use drugs or gamble. He kept in regular contact with his family, friends and co-workers, and they all said he was behaving normally and appeared happy before he went missing. He was declared legally dead in 1997. His case remains unsolved.
Number 5.
Cynthia was last seen in Oakdale, New York on July 11, 1969. She went to take the dog for a walk along the railroad tracks of the Montauk branch train of the Long Island Railroad. The dog returned home without her just a few minutes later, with its collar and leash still on. Earlier on the day of her disappearance, Cynthia and her brother had gone into the woods and seen a muskrat den, and she said she wanted to go back and find the muskrat. 3 young boys said they'd seen Cynthia going into the woods with her dog, and when her brother led authorities to the muskrat hole, they found tracks consistent with Cynthia and the dog. The tracks were wiped out by rain before they could be closely examined or preserved, however. Cynthia has never been heard from again. She didn't take any belongings with her, and at the time of her disappearance her rabbit was about to give birth, and she was looking forward to seeing the babies. Her family never believed she ran away, they thought she was abducted. The police considered Cynthia's father a possibly suspect in her disappearance. He had a bicycle shop on Montauk Highway in Oakdale and laid a new cement floor in the basement around the time of Cynthia's disappearance. Several local people were suggested as potential suspects, but no one has been charged or named publicly. It's worth noting that she disappeared near the train station and could have encountered numerous people there who weren't local to the area. Cynthia's parents are both dead, but her brother is still alive. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 6.
Cooper was last seen in Rochester, New York sometime between May and July of 1999. He left behind a 3-year-old son, and his girlfriend was pregnant with their daughter. Most of his family lived on the Cattaraugus Indian Reservation, more than a 2-hour drive away. His mother died of cancer in 2010, 11 years after his disappearance. In March 2011, James Kendrick and Pablo Plaza were charged with murdering Cooper. The defendants, both of them Cooper's cousins, were two of 11 individuals charged with a variety of drug and weapons-related offenses. Kendrick, Plaza, and other individuals are also charged with murdering Francisco Santos, who disappeared from Rochester in 1998. His body was found in May 1999 on the Cattaraugus Indian Reservation. Authorities believe Kendrick had been the ringleader of a violent drug trafficking enterprise since 1993. A photo of him is posted with this case summary. In May 2014, Plaza reached a plea deal with the prosecution. He admitted he'd been involved in the murders of Cooper and Santos and pleaded guilty to Santos's murder. Plaza stated he's been present when two people beat Cooper to death. The motive for the killing was that Cooper, who was also a member of the drug gang, knew about Santos's murder and knew where the body was, and the other members of the gang thought he might go to the police. In July 2016, Kendrick was convicted of a slew of charges, including the murders of Santos and Cooper. Cooper's body has never been located. Investigators believe it was dismembered, possibly in a wood chipper, and the parts were stuffed in garbage bags and dumped near the railroad tracks in Rochester. Foul play is suspected in his case due to the circumstances involved.
Number 7.
Cosgrove traveled from her home in Edinburgh, Scotland to New York City in March 2003 to see the St. Patrick's Day parade. Her family members advised her not to go because of her illness, but she went anyway. She arrived at Newark International Airport in Newark, New Jersey on March 13 and checked into the Belvedere Hotel on West 48th Street in the borough of Manhattan. Cosgrove lost her travel bag, which contained her passport and return plane ticket, the same day she arrived in the United States. She was disoriented and confused throughout her stay, forgetting the name of her hotel and once going to the wrong hotel. Cosgrove was last seen leaving the Belvedere Hotel on March 18. She planned to go to the airport and report the loss of her bag. She never got on her return flight to Scotland and has never been heard from again. Her family reported her as a missing person on March 21, the day she was supposed to have arrived home. Cosgrove used a credit card to check into the Belvedere Hotel, but the card has not been used since she disappeared and no money has been withdrawn from her bank account. She is believed to have been carrying about $600 in cash when she went missing. She left some of her belongings behind at her hotel room, but the items contained no clues as to her whereabouts. 8 months after Cosgrove's disappearance, her missing passport was mailed from the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. to a passport office in Peterborough, England. They forwarded it to Cosgrove's home in Scotland. Authorities do not know who found the passport initially or where it was found. Foul play is not suspected in Cosgrove's disappearance, but her fate is unclear. Her family in the United Kingdom believes she may be homeless or deceased.